Oh dear, is this working? Oh, it is. Hello all. My name is Alexandra. I'm sure Travis has talked at length about who I am. I do apologize for taking over Travis's account, but he hasn't been seen or heard from since he attacked me and Olivia. Oh dear, I probably shouldn't have said that. Well, I suppose I might as well fill you all in on what has happened. Ever since we defeated King Creel, Travis has been in a terrible downward spiral. I'm sure he has filled you all in on his little late night episodes. I've had the misfortune of walking in on his return. It terrifies me when I see his deranged face staring at me. Those button eyes and his chalk white skin send me back to the decades I lived under Creel's control. While what I went through was nowhere as bad as how Travis got it, it was still a horrible experience. Being turned into a doll is something I cannot begin to describe to all you sweet people. I can best describe it as being unable to move, talk, or anything. I believe that's known as being paralyzed. The one thing I could do, however, was communicate with the other dolls. Not through talking, mind you, but through our thoughts. We each could talk to and feel each other's thoughts. It's difficult to explain, especially for me, but it was like the voice you have in your head of yourself being able to talk to another person. I tried to cheer Travis up in any way I could, but he just stayed in his room and continued his downward spiral. The day I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow was the night when I woke up to check on him and saw him standing outside of Olivia's room. Hand on the doorknob and knife clutched firmly in his hand. He looked at me with a smile that chilled me to the very bone. It was like King Creel's. I approached him and gently took him into my arms. I hugged him tightly, hoping that he would get the murderous rage out on me instead of Olivia. I held him for what felt like an hour, my heart practically pounding out of my chest. But soon he dropped the knife and wrapped his arms around me. Patting his back, I carefully led him back to his bed and sat him down in it. I know he can't sleep, but it's better than having him threatening to hurt my Olivia. Since then I've made sure to keep an extra eye on him. And well, it looks like I didn't keep a close enough eye on him. Travis has been sneaking out much more frequently. Not just at night for his little murders, but going out until the brink of dawn and coming back without so much as a word. He wouldn't speak to me or anything, and it caused me to wonder what he could possibly be doing. That question was answered when one night, as I was tucking Olivia into bed, I heard him talking to himself. He had left his door open a crack and I was able to listen in on him. Past the ramblings and giggles, I kept hearing him repeat the same phrase over and over. It's almost time. Almost time. Almost time. Over and over again he said that. What could he have meant? I racked my brain all night trying to think of what he could possibly be walking about. A familiar friend brought some much needed clearance. I know how much you all seem to love the little template doll. And I must confess, he is quite the cute little thing. And he seemingly cares deeply for Travis, so he was able to fill me in on what he had been doing all this time. Travis had been going to the Voodoo shop night after night and seemingly talking to King Creel in some capacity. That's why I tried to stop Travis from going that morning. Seeing the blank sheet of paper he called a flyer sent chills up my spine. Finally, when he emerged from his room dressed up as King Creel, it finally hit me. He had managed to claw his way back to us. Sometimes I wish I could just take Olivia and run from all this. But I look at Travis like a son. And any parent should help their children when they are in desperate need for help. So after Travis had left the house, I quickly called Olivia in sick for the day and kept her home and near to me. She was just as wagged on. Olivia fell asleep in my arms and I held her as she did, keeping her close and watching as the minutes ticked on and on. I nearly fell asleep myself when I heard the sounds of tapping on the window. I flinched awake and looked towards the window right next to the bed. And the smiling pale face of Travis met me. His red painted cheeks so stark against his pale face. I had barely any time to think before he began smashing his head against the window over and over again. Olivia startled awake and quickly clung to me, trying to figure out what was going on. I quickly stood up and ordered her to run to her room and lock the door. "But I don't want to leave you, Mommy," she screamed hysterically, clinging to my legs and refusing to budge as I grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I looked down at her and felt like I was already being stabbed in my heart. I didn't want to leave her either. But I had no other option. I quickly bent down and kissed her. "It'll be okay. I'll come to get you. Just go, please," I pleaded with her. holding her adorable little face in my hands. She looked at me and quickly nodded, fetching the template from my bed and quickly running for the door. I next turned my attention to Travis, who was now stabbing his way through the window, finally smashing his way in and climbing inside. He was no longer wearing the hate, but a horrible smile was still plastered on his face. Alexandra. Just the Brit I was looking for. He chuckled at me, putting his hand into his hair and giving it a good stroke. That boy so desperately needs a good haircut. He took a step towards me, and I quickly jutted the knife out towards him. Please, Travis. I know you don't want to do this, I said, my hands trembling despite my efforts to the contrary. His smile grew wider as he chuckled at me, stepping closer and clutching his knife with such intensity I thought he was going to break the wooden handle. Just be lucky the little brat isn't here. I would just love to gut her like a little lamb. He snickered, planting his knife into the headboard of my bed and dragging it across it as he stepped closer. I swallowed the bile building up in my mouth and continued to give up ground, staring at his button eyes and imaging back to when I was first turned into a doll. And just the horror I felt as I stared into Creel's eyes as he laughed at me for my stupid mistake. Well, I won't ever make that same mistake ever again. Quickly holding my knife out I charged at him, catching off guard and bashing him in the head with the handle. He stumbled to the side, and with an animal-like growl, he pulled the knife from the wooden headboard and slashed at me. Receiving a glancing blow on my arm I bit my lips hard so as not to give him the satisfaction of any noise from me. Clutching my arm I saw that he was winding up for another swipe at me, so I ducked and rushed him again, planting my head firmly in his stomach. I think it's called a headbutt. Whatever it's called, it got him to retch and stumble to the floor. Acting quickly I kicked the knife away from his hand, only to receive a sharp and painful stab to my foot from a small knife he was hiding in his pocket. This time I let out a pained screech. Bending over I gritted my teeth while he giggled, as if he had just done the most hilarious thing he could think of. Undeterred I shrugged off the stab and pointed my own knife at his throat. I know for a fact that is his weak spot, and he seemingly knew too as he quickly froze in his place. You wouldn't dare. He chuckled, his demeanor changing before my very eyes. His crazed smile and little giggles ceased. A more refined and dignified tone took over in his voice. A hint of a southern accent. King Creel. Wouldn't I? I won't let either of you harm me or Olivia, I said calmly. Despite the pain I felt from the blood leaking out of me. He smiled at me. The smile Creel gives when he knows he has an edge over someone. I would never hurt Olivia. I've told you as such. But you. Oh, I and the other Travis would be more than happy to see your traitorous blood spilled everywhere. He chuckled, shifting a bit and pressing his neck right up against the knife I had against it. My brows raised as I backed the knife out. He smiled and easily pushed me off. If you really wanted to hurt us, you would have used that sharp part on us. He chuckled again, standing up and patting himself off. Pulling that black top hat from seemingly nowhere he placed it on his head and pulled his fingers across the brim of it. Standing up and using the bed to keep my balance as I lifted my injured leg up like a horse I stared at him. That may be true. But you no longer deserve to walk on this earth, Creel, I said to him, placing my leg down and grunting as I applied pressure to it. Walking up to him and meeting him eye to buttons. And so help me, I will save Travis from you. He offered me a smile and a TSK. Wagging his finger at me. God, he can be so condescending when he thinks he has the upper hand. He reached out and grabbed me by the throat, giving it a hard squeeze and stealing any air I had in my lungs as he held me a good 3 feet off the floor. And who are you to tell me that? He asked, his cordial tone dropping, and that animalistic snarl that he had when he was enraged. Shouldn't you be dead? Perhaps you'd like to be the actual age you should be. Remind me again, Alexandra. Aren't you supposed to be almost 130? He asked me, bringing my face mere inches from his. And you aren't? I asked him, still defiant to him. He raised a brow and chuckled. He tossed me to the floor and walked over to me, kicking me in the head with his shiny dress shoes. The world spun as I fell fully to the floor. He climbed on top of me and squished my face into the floor. I closed my eyes and tried to force back tears, but they started flowing. You dare to tell me that? You, the woman who abandoned her children and came to America all by herself, left the poor things with your low-life alcoholic husband. he snarled in my ear, pressing my face down deeper into the floor while he relished my soft crying. Would you like to know what he did to them? He cooed, lifting me up by my hair and staring at me with his button eyes. No, I don't. Because Olivia is my daughter. She's the only family I need. I shouted at him, causing him to flinch at my response. He bashed my face down on the floor again, my vision going blurry and dark from the hit. I gave her to you. And I can easily rip her away from you. He shouted at me, standing up and walking past me, heading towards the bedroom door. I looked up in horror and struggled to push myself up and save Olivia. Turns out I didn't have to, since I heard a thud. Looking up, I saw that Travis's body had slumped to the floor and was twitching violently. Cautiously, I pushed myself up and grabbed one of the knives from the floor. Limping over to the body, it suddenly stopped twitching and shot up, grabbing me by the arms. Alexandra, you need to lock me up. Stop me from doing anything else to you. Please. Travis begged me. I could tell it was him by just his voice and mannerisms. I quickly got down on the floor and grabbed him by the shoulders. Travis, you know that can't stop Creel from escaping. I told him in a soft tone to calm him down. He stared at me for a moment and seemingly knew that I was right. Looking at me, he began heaving and hiccuping. Since he can't really cry tears, that's all he can really do. I wrapped my arms around him and patted his back. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He whimpered, hugging me tightly and crying into my neck. This poor boy has gone through so much. And it pains me to see just how much he has deteriorated since I was first brought back as a human. It's okay. It's okay. I told him, trying to calm him down enough to get him to open up about what Creel was planning. When he finally did, he slumped a bit as he seemingly was trying to remember anything about what the voodoo creature was planning. The voodoo shop. That's all I know really. He wants to reopen it. I can only assume it's to get his power back and maybe put my soul and other Travis's soul in a doll. He said quickly, standing up and looking around, confused and scared as all hell. He then looked at me and grabbed my shoulders. Please help me. I can't stay here. It's too dangerous for me here. You have to help. He said quickly, reaching into his suit pocket and handing me his cellular phone. Before quickly running towards the window and jumping out of it. Horrified, I ran to see what had happened to him. But as I got to the window, I saw him running off down the street at full sprint. Looking down at his phone, I struggled with opening it and finally figured it out. His password was simple as well, and soon I learned about all of you. Thank you all for helping him in the limited ways you all can. But now it looks like it's up to me and Olivia to help save Travis. She would not take no for an answer when I told her that I was going to try and help him. She loves him like a brother and she wants to save him. But another unlikely ally has also made himself known. The Voodoo template. In fact, he has suggested getting help from an old friend of ours. Of course, it would be risky to try and contact her, but at this rate, Mary is all we have left to try and help Travis. So, we will perform a seance to try and summon her. Hopefully, she will help us in any way that she can.